So I've been wanting to make a video on this very topic for a long time. The problem was there is an infinite number of ways to approach it. So I tried my best to be clear and concise. I spent a lot of time on this script too, and have done plenty of research piecing together my ideas, the best ones I can find on Reddit and YouTube. So here it is. So, cancel culture is a form of social punishment, and punishment requires wrongdoing, right? Those targeted by it have generally acted immorally and should be held accountable. Who on earth is actually denying this? Seriously, I don't understand what is going on here. All the supporters of cancel culture have pushed that people must be held accountable for their wrongdoings. But who is denying that? Don't we all want people to be held accountable? Or almost all, because we can never be too sure nowadays. I'm sure most want this to be the case. So let's not waste time arguing with each other over things that we actually agree on. It's obviously not just about being held accountable. That's just a distraction tactic. It's about being held accountable in an appropriate manner. Let me repeat that, in an appropriate manner. Here are some examples, and you can tell me in the comments if any of this behavior or even the response seems marginally appropriate. Keep in mind the people I'm about to show you, if they had their way, they would either censor, erase, or ban any of the speakers I'm about to show you.
The speaking engagement with the polarizing Breitbart editor had been planned for quite some time. Police had anticipated the crowd and the protest, but before this event could even begin, it was shut down because of a fiery clash.
The protest quickly turned violent. Demonstrators set fires, smashed windows, and destroyed property at UC Berkeley. Anticipating trouble, police appeared to use flashbangs and pepper spray to clear the surging crowd of 1,500. All of UC Berkeley locked down, students sheltering in place as protesters moved downtown. There were brawls in the street. The chaos on campus began before Milo Yiannopoulos was set to speak at Cal. The controversial far right-wing editor from Breitbart News criticized for racist and misogynistic views.
Go Milo!
Invited by the Student Republican Party, Yiannopoulos released this video after the violence.
Even if the things that they said about me were true, there still wouldn't be an appropriate response to ideas.
Between police and protesters forced school officials there to cancel yet another speaking engagement. Now it's happened again, this time at the very university where the free speech movement was born.
Let's look at differences between men and women that are explicitly anatomical and physiological. Are men taller than women on average? Does anyone take offense at that fact? Are you irritated?
There's always a standout.
So I would say you could be irritated by it. You could be irritated by the fact that women have to be the ones to gestate and lactate. You could be irritated by a lot of truths. But taking offense is a response that is rejection of reality. So men and women are different on height, they're different on muscle mass, they're different on where fat is deposited on our bodies, right? Our brains are also different. So there's some binaries.
Oh, wow. Security! This is what happens. Oh, did they shut off the volume? Can you hear? Can everybody hear?
Really? He's a piece of shit. That is not okay. Even the women in there have been brainwashed.
Should not listen to fascism. It should not be tolerated in civil society. Nazis are not welcome in civil society.
And here's a clip from Evergreen College when they attempted to have a day of white absence. But the catch was, white people were basically forced into not showing up.
I'm reading the Bible in the room and we're fucking done with this. Like, they haven't answered shit. So, like, how about administration, George, when do you get the fuck out? Like, we're done. Like, we're done. No justice. Fuck. He said, I can't. No justice. Fuck peace. 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 Fuck you, George. See your way out. Peace. Hey, fuck Brett too. He's not to get fired. Fuck you, Brett. Get out of my space. And all you other students here perpetuating white supremacy and racism, you guys get your ass out of here too. Yes, see your way out. This is college. No.
It mostly seems to be coming from mobs orchestrating themselves on the internet, usually by Twitter. I just want to touch on how it seems to me that cancel culture predominantly attacks soft targets. You never really hear them go after Daniel Tosh, who till this day the cancel mob has not even bothered to try to cancel him for his joke about.
I play practical jokes on her constantly though. I got her so good a few weeks ago. I replaced her pepper spray with silly string. Anyway, that night she got raped. And she called me the next day going, "You son of a bitch! You got me so good." No. As soon as I started spraying in the face, I'm like, "Daniel! This is gonna really hurt."
Or Bill Burr, or Anthony Jeselnik. It's usually people they know they can manipulate into doing what they want. People like Kevin Hart or J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, or even like famous tennis player Martina Navratilova. I think, yeah, Martina Navratilova. Yeah, that's probably how it's pronounced. Who simply just disagreed that trans women were actually fully women and should compete in like women's sports, for example. You know, and that's all it took to get them canceled. A lot of the time, if you show any sign of complacency, that's all it takes, and they will crush you. They don't care. But I digress. This leads me to my first point. Let me remind you of the undisputed golden rule of punishment, that the punishment must be proportional to the crime. And yes, some crimes do clearly scream out for the harshest punishments that we have on the books. I don't think we have punishments that can sufficiently make up, for instance, the harm caused by sexual abusers. But let's not pretend as though these are the only people being targeted by cancel culture. It's not like they exclusively go after Bill Cosby. The problem is that with the creation of social media, we have within our power something the likes of which has never been seen in the history of humanity. And we've deliberately made frivolous attempts to ensure that it's being wielded responsibly. The power of social media, when weaponized, is larger than anything any person or government could ever have dreamed of. Even just a few decades ago, never before have we had the ability to turn the entire world's attention onto a single individual. And that individual may not even be a public figure, maybe just some random teenager whose tweet went unexpectedly viral. Let's be honest here though. Cancel culture doesn't just focus its attention on the most serious of moral crimes that really deserve it, like murderers or sexual abusers, because it doesn't need to, since that's what our legal system is for. Cancel culture more commonly turns its attention to moral crimes, which are bad and sometimes really bad, but never infinitely bad. So let's start piecing this together. A moral wrong is not always a crime, but that doesn't seem to be the case with cancel culture. It behaves with an entitled sense of moral elitism, if you will. A moral crime could be considered lying to make someone feel better about themselves, but that does not mean that a legal crime was committed. For example, like cheating on a midterm or an exam at school would be considered a crime of morals, yet you can't be arrested for it, but your school, you know, if you're caught, they could expel you or have you fail the class. Also, I mean, just things like lying on your resume would be a moral violation, yet you can't be arrested for it. So let's say, you know, an individual's moral crime is genuinely bad. Is it bad enough that we have to commit the equivalent of taking a heat-seeking missile and having it target a single individual? Because that's basically what social media does. It roots itself in our private as well as our public life, making it genuinely impossible to escape. It is the single most powerful social weapon we have available to us. So this is my first challenge to believers in cancel culture. Can you specify the exact extent to which you think canceling can be appropriately weaponized? How can we ensure that given its weaponization, that the punishment is proportional to the crime? I haven't even heard a rational attempt at this, but surely this is the single most important thing to begin with. Let's be even more specific. Is the punishment of a week under the wrath of a Twitter mob enough, or the banning of their account? Is being ostracized by friends and family, loss of employment, or future employment enough? We need some specificity here because some crimes maybe do warrant all these things, but how on earth can we possibly ensure that the person in question only receives a punishment that does not go beyond the severity of the crime they have committed? How can you ensure that it won't go off the rails? If you can't, then what you're advocating for essentially becomes a machine for disproportionate and arbitrary punishment, which is beyond morally irresponsible. And you see, disproportionate and arbitrary punishment is the behavior of oppressors and tyrants, not of morally serious thinking beings. It's one of the first things that any functioning system of legal justice must ensure cannot materialize. And it just so happens to be the one thing that cancel culture does best. Once it starts, it basically doesn't stop until the mob finds someone else to cancel. And even if the reason they are being canceled turns out to be a completely fabricated lie, that person's reputation almost always is forever ruined. For example, and that's the end of part 1. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to like, comment, or subscribe. I'll have part 2 out tomorrow.